Morning light streamed through the tall windows of the Harrison mansion, spreading across the marble floors and making the chandeliers glimmer softly. It was a peaceful, almost perfect picture of wealth and comfort. The sound of birds outside mixed with the faint hum of a vacuum cleaner as Lena, the maid, moved carefully from room to room. She worked quietly, her movements graceful and practiced. She had been in this house for years, long enough to know the rhythm of the family who lived there, their laughter, their tempers, their silences. But that morning was a little different. Her daughter, Nia, was sitting quietly in the corner of the grand living room, waiting as her mother dusted the furniture. Nia was small for her age, with calm brown eyes that always seemed to be observing the world rather than speaking about it. She didn't say much, but there was something in her gaze that felt older than her years. Curious, patient and thoughtful. The mansion had many beautiful things, but nothing fascinated Nia more than the piano that stood in the center of the living room. It was huge and gleaming, its keys shining under the morning light. Whenever someone walked past it, they could see their reflection in its polished surface. Most of the time it stayed silent, just another decoration in a house already full of things. But to Nia it wasn't just furniture, it was a mystery. She would often sit nearby while her mother cleaned and just stare at it. She imagined the sound it could make, the feeling of her fingers touching the cool keys. She had never been allowed to try. Her mother always warned her gently, "Don't go near it. Nia, that piano cost more than our house." And Nia listened, because she knew her mother couldn't risk losing her job. Still, every day she dreamed, the Harrison children, Claire and Tom, often passed by Nia when she came with her mother. They were around her age but lived in a completely different world. They had private tutors, fancy clothes, and the kind of confidence that came from never being told no. To them, Nia was invisible, just the maid's daughter who tagged along. Sometimes they made fun of her quietness or her old shoes. It never seemed cruel to them. It was just how they were taught to see things. That morning, Claire was sitting with her friend on the couch, scrolling through her tablet. She looked up when Nia's eyes wandered toward the piano again. "You like that thing, don't you?" she said with a teasing smile. Her friend laughed softly. "Do you even know what it's called?" Nia looked down, unsure if she should answer. Her mother tried to move faster, hoping to finish the room before any teasing could begin. But Claire wasn't done. "Go on, what do you think it's for?" she said, folding her arms. "It's for music," Nia said quietly. Claire tilted her head, pretending to be impressed. "Oh, really? Maybe you can play it for us then." Her tone was playful, but it carried that sharp edge that made Nia's stomach twist. The other girl laughed again. Lena turned quickly. "She's just a child," she said softly. "She's not here to play anything." Nia stayed silent, but her heart beat faster. She wanted to touch those keys so badly, even just once. She wanted to feel what music felt like when it came from her own hands. After a moment, the girls grew bored and went upstairs, their laughter echoing down the hallway. Lena sighed and looked at her daughter. "Don't let them get to you," she said quietly. Nia nodded, pretending not to care, but deep down, she felt something burning, a quiet determination she didn't understand yet. When the mansion grew quiet that afternoon, Nia followed her mother from room to room, helping to fold napkins or polish silverware. Every time she passed the piano, she glanced at it, unable to resist. She noticed the way light reflected differently on the white and black keys, the way a tiny layer of dust had settled on its edge. Her fingers itched to brush it off. As the day wore on, Lena worked in the kitchen while the rest of the household was out. Nia wandered back into the living room. The house was silent except for the ticking of the big clock on the wall. She looked around to make sure no one was there. Her heart thudded as she took a step closer to the piano. Her small hand reached out and gently pressed a single key. A soft note filled the room. She froze, startled by how beautiful it sounded. She waited for someone to shout, but no one did. The silence that followed seemed to invite her. So she pressed another key, then another. The sound was uneven, but something about it felt right. She began to play random notes, trying to make sense of how each key changed the sound. Then, almost by instinct, she started forming a small tune she remembered from the radio. It wasn't perfect, but it was clear and gentle. She didn't notice her mother standing in the doorway, frozen. Lena watched her daughter in disbelief. She had never seen Nia touch an instrument before, yet there she was, her hands moving with a kind of natural grace. The music wasn't just sound, it had feeling. It was shy and careful but full of heart. "Naya," her mother whispered softly. The girl jumped, her fingers flying off the keys. "I'm sorry," she said quickly. "I didn't mean to," but her mother shook her head. "Where did you learn that?" Nia hesitated. "I didn't, I just listened. I think I remember how it sounds." Lena looked at her for a long time. She wanted to scold her, to remind her how dangerous it was to touch the family's things, but she couldn't. The sound of that melody still hung in the air, tender and full of something she couldn't put into words. When the Harrisons returned that evening, everything went back to normal. The mansion filled with voices and footsteps, and the piano once again sat untouched, silent and elegant. But for Nia, something had changed. She had touched it once, and that one moment had opened a door in her heart she couldn't close again. That night she lay on the small mattress in their little room at the back of the house. She couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the piano keys and heard the notes again. Her fingers twitched as if trying to play in the air. Her mother sat beside her, brushing her hair gently. "You shouldn't have done that," Lena said softly, but her voice wasn't angry. It was scared. "If they had seen you, they could have said something." "You know how they are." "I know," Nia whispered. "But Mama," it sounded so pretty. "I just wanted to hear it for real. I wanted to know if I could make it sound like the songs I hear." Lena looked at her daughter's face, full of wonder and innocence. She wanted to protect that light, but she also knew the world didn't make it easy for people like them. Still, she couldn't bring herself to tell Nia to stop dreaming. "Just promise me," she said quietly. "You'll be careful. Don't play it when anyone's around." Nia nodded. "I promise." In the days that followed, she kept her promise, mostly. She watched and listened more closely whenever someone played music, whether it was on the radio, a commercial, or a short clip on Claire's tablet. She memorized melodies and rhythms, storing them in her mind like treasures. And when no one was around, she practiced again, just for a few minutes, just enough to touch that magic once more. Her fingers were clumsy at first, but every time she played, the music grew smoother, richer. It was as if the piano recognized her, guiding her through each note. Her mother tried not to watch, but sometimes she would pause in the doorway, a quiet smile forming before she forced herself to walk away. She didn't want her daughter to get caught, but she couldn't deny what she saw. There was something rare in Nia's touch, something pure. The mansion remained a world of luxury and rules, a place where a maid's daughter was supposed to stay unseen. Yet in the quiet corners of that house, a small miracle was taking shape. Nia didn't know it yet, but the same piano that symbolized the distance between her world and theirs would soon become the bridge that changed everything. For now, she only knew the feeling of music beneath her fingers and the secret joy it brought her. And every night, before falling asleep, she whispered softly to herself, "One day Mama will hear me play." The morning began like any other. The sound of footsteps echoed through the marble halls of the Harrison mansion, and the faint smell of coffee drifted from the kitchen. Lena moved quickly, polishing the silverware and dusting the tables before the family came downstairs. Her daughter, Nia, followed quietly behind her, helping where she could. She had a soft smile that came and went like sunlight through clouds, but inside Nia's mind was somewhere else. Ever since she had touched the piano and heard its sound, something had awakened inside her. Each night she heard the notes in her dreams. Each day she looked for chances to listen, to learn, to imagine. The mansion was full of music if you paid attention. The doorbell's tone, the ticking of the old clock, the rhythm of footsteps across the floor. She found melody in everything. That morning, while Lena cleaned the study, Nia wandered into the living room again. The piano stood in its usual place, shining under the morning light. It almost seemed alive, waiting for her. She stopped a few feet away, glancing around to make sure no one was near. Her heart started beating faster, that same pull drawing her in. She wanted to play again, just one note, just one small moment of that magic. Before she could move closer, laughter broke the silence. Claire and Tom came into the room with two of their friends. They were wearing their school uniforms, neat and pressed, their shoes clicking on the floor. Claire carried a music book in her hand. "Oh no," Tom groaned. "Are we really practicing again? We're terrible." "We have to," Claire said, rolling her eyes. "The school recital is next week. Dad said we can't embarrass him in front of the guests." Nia froze. "A recital?" Her heart skipped. She stood quietly by the corner, pretending to fold napkins on the table as she listened. Claire opened the piano lid and sat down, flipping through her music sheets. She tried a few notes, frowning when the sound didn't match the melody in her head. "That's not right," she muttered. She tried again, pressing harder, but the notes clashed unpleasantly. Her friend giggled. "It sounds like someone dropped silverware," Tom smirked. "Maybe the piano's broken. Or maybe you just can't play." Claire glared at him. "Oh, shut up." She tried again, slower this time, but the tune still didn't come together. Naya couldn't help it. She whispered the right notes under her breath, almost too soft to hear. She wasn't trying to show off. She just couldn't stand hearing it wrong. Her ears caught the mistake instantly, and the correction slipped out of her like a reflex. Unfortunately, Claire heard her. "What did you say?" she asked sharply, turning toward her. Naya blinked, startled. I just said the middle note was higher," she murmured. Claire raised an eyebrow. "And how would you know that?" Tom laughed. "What, can you play or something?" Nia shook her head quickly. "No, I just listened." Her quietness made them laugh harder. "Listened?" Claire repeated. "To what, the radio?" Nia nodded. "Sometimes. My mom used to play songs when we cleaned. I remember the sounds." Claire's friend grinned. "You mean you think you can play by ear?" "I don't know," Nia said honestly. "Maybe a little." Claire exchanged a look with her brother and smirked. "All right then, Miss Music Ear, why don't you show us?" "Come on, play." Nia froze in place. Her throat went dry. "I'm not supposed to," she whispered. "Why not?" Claire asked, pretending to look offended. "You were just correcting me, weren't you?" "Go on then. Let's see what you can do," Tom snorted. "This is going to be funny." Lena entered the room just then, holding a tray of glasses. She immediately sensed what was happening. "Nia, go help me in the kitchen," she said gently but firmly. "Oh, come on," Claire said, laughing. "We just want to see if she can actually play." "She's just a child," Lena replied softly. "Please let her be." Nia looked between them, her heart thudding. She wanted to play more than anything, but not like this. Not when they were laughing. She lowered her eyes and followed her mother out of the room, hearing their snickers behind her. Back in the kitchen, Lena set the tray down and sighed. "You can't talk to them like that," she said quietly. "I didn't mean to," Naya said, her voice trembling a little. "I just wanted to help." She was playing the wrong note. Lena turned to her, her expression softer now. "I know, sweetheart. But you must remember where we are. Not everyone will understand your heart the way I do. Some people laugh at what they don't understand." Nia nodded, biting her lip. "I just wanted to play once. For real." That night, after the Harrisons went to bed, the mansion grew silent again. The only sound was the faint chirping of crickets outside. Lena was finishing up the last bit of cleaning, and Nia waited patiently near the hall. When her mother wasn't looking, she slipped into the living room again. The piano waited in the moonlight, its surface glowing silver under the soft glow from the window. Nia sat down quietly, her hands shaking slightly. She placed her fingers on the keys and pressed one note. Softly, carefully. The sound filled the room like a whisper. Then she began to play the tune she had heard Claire struggle with earlier that day. Her fingers moved hesitantly at first, then more surely. The melody flowed together, delicate and smooth. She wasn't reading from a book or remembering notes from a lesson. She was simply listening, to her memory, to her heart. Her mother's footsteps sounded faintly in the hallway. Lena appeared in the doorway, ready to scold her for staying up. But when she saw Nia's face, her expression changed. The music filled the room, gentle yet full of feeling. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest. It was the kind of playing that made you stop and listen. Lena stood still, not wanting to break the moment. She had heard plenty of music in her life, but this was different. This wasn't just talent, it was something deeper. When the song ended, Naya turned and gasped softly. "I'm sorry, Mama, I didn't mean to." But her mother walked over slowly and knelt beside her. "You played beautifully," she said in a whisper. Nia looked down shyly. "I just remembered what it sounded like." Lena smiled faintly, her eyes full of pride and worry. "You have something special, my girl. But we have to be careful. If they see you playing, they might not be kind about it." "I'll be careful," Nia said softly. I feel happy when I play. Like I'm somewhere else." Her mother nodded. "I know. Your father used to say that too." Nia looked at her, surprised. "Did he play?" Lena smiled faintly, her eyes distant. "He used to fix old instruments. He couldn't read music, but he could make anything sing. He said music doesn't come from paper, it comes from people. Nia smiled softly, her fingers brushing the keys again. Then maybe I got it from him. Lena placed a hand on her shoulder. Maybe you did. They stayed there for a moment in the quiet, the moonlight wrapping around them like a soft blanket. Then Lena whispered, "All right, that's enough for tonight. Go get some sleep before someone wakes up." Nia nodded, but as she walked away, she glanced back at the piano one more time. She couldn't explain it, but she felt like it was calling to her, as if it understood her better than anyone else could. Over the next few days, the mansion was busy with preparations for the Harrisons' upcoming dinner party. Guests were expected from the city, and everything had to look perfect. Lena worked longer hours and Nia helped where she could. But every chance she got, she found her way back to the piano, even if only for a few minutes. Sometimes, when no one was looking, she played soft, simple tunes, ones she made up herself. They were songs of her daydreams, the sound of the wind through trees, the warmth of her mother's hand, the feeling of hope she couldn't quite put into words. Unbeknownst to her, someone had heard her one afternoon. One of the older maids had paused outside the living room and listened quietly, her eyes wide. She told Lena later in a whisper, "Your girl has a gift. Don't let it go to waste." That night, Lena sat on the edge of her bed, her thoughts heavy. She knew her daughter had something special, something rare, but she also knew how cruel the world could be to people who were born without privilege. Music might be Nia's dream, but dreams often came with a price. Still, when she saw her daughter asleep, a faint smile on her face, Lena felt something she hadn't in a long time. Hope. Maybe, just maybe, her little girl was meant for something more than this life of cleaning other people's floors. Maybe one day the world would hear her play and finally see her for who she really was. And as the night deepened, the piano in the living room stood silent again, but it was no longer just a piece of furniture. It had become the secret doorway to a future that neither of them could yet imagine. The rain had been falling since dawn, tapping softly against the tall windows of the mansion. The sound mixed with the faint smell of coffee and polish as Lena wiped down the last table in the grand hall. Nia sat nearby, folding napkins, her small hands moving with care. She didn't mind the quiet. She liked rainy days. They made everything feel calmer, softer. And when the world outside grew gray, the music in her mind grew louder. It had been several weeks since she had first played the piano in secret. Every night when the house went still, she would sneak into the living room, her feet light on the marble floor, and play softly under the glow of the moon. Her music had grown more confident. She could now play songs she had only heard once. She could even create her own little melodies, ones that seemed to come from somewhere deep inside her heart. Her mother had caught her a few times, but no longer stopped her. Lena only watched from the doorway, a faint smile on her tired face. She didn't have the heart to tell her to stop anymore. Each time Nia played, the sound seemed to lift something heavy off both of them, as if the music itself was washing away the weight of their long days. That morning, while the rain continued, Claire was sitting in the living room with a few friends from school. They were supposed to be practicing their piece for the recital, but instead they were chatting and laughing about dresses and the food that would be served. One of them sat at the piano, pressing random keys, making a jumble of sounds. "Ugh, that sounds awful," Claire said, wrinkling her nose. "I don't know how we're supposed to make this sound good." Her friend shrugged. "Maybe we just tell the teacher we can't perform. I mean, no one cares if we play or not." "That's easy for you to say," Claire muttered. "My dad does. He's inviting people from his company. He'll be furious if I mess up." Nia was in the corner, wiping the table. She could hear every note they were getting wrong. The melody was familiar now. She had memorized it from listening to their earlier practices. Her hands twitched slightly with each mistake. When one of the girls played a completely off-key note, Nia couldn't help but hum the right one softly under her breath. It was just a habit now, like breathing, but Claire heard her. She looked up sharply. "Did you just hum something?" Nia froze, realizing she'd been caught. "I'm sorry," she said quickly. "I didn't mean to. Just what?" Claire asked, crossing her arms. "I just thought the third note was different," Nia said, her voice barely above a whisper. The room fell silent for a moment before one of the girls laughed. "You think you can do better?" Nia shook her head fast. "No, Claire smirked. "Go ahead then. Show us." Nia's stomach twisted. I can't. I'm not supposed to touch it. Oh, come on, one girl said, rolling her eyes. It's not going to break. You said you knew the note, right? Let's hear it. Lena entered the room at that moment holding a basket of clean towels. Nia, she said softly, sensing the tension. Come help me in the kitchen. But Nia's heart was pounding. Something inside her wanted to prove herself, not to show off, but to let the music speak for her. She took a slow breath, then looked at Claire. Just one time, she said quietly. Then I'll stop. Claire gave a small shrug, half amused, half curious. Go on then. Nia walked to the piano. Her hands were trembling as she sat down. The bench felt too high, the air too still. She hesitated, her reflection staring back at her in the glossy black wood. Then she placed her fingers gently on the keys. She pressed the first note. Soft, steady. Then another and another. Within seconds, the simple tune they had been trying to play came to life under her touch. The melody was clear, flowing like the rain outside, each note falling perfectly into place. It wasn't just accurate, it was full of feeling. The girls stared, their laughter fading. Even Claire leaned forward, eyes wide. The sound filled the room, calm and beautiful. When the last note faded, Nia lifted her hands quickly and stood up. I'm sorry, she said again, backing away from the piano. No one spoke for a moment. Then Tom, who had been watching from the staircase, burst out laughing. Wait, you mean she can actually play? Claire blinked, still surprised. I guess so. Then, as if realizing what had just happened, she frowned. You memorized that by listening? Nia nodded, unsure if she had done something wrong. That's weird, one of the girls said. Who can do that? I didn't mean to make you mad, Nia said softly. I just wanted to hear it the right way. Claire stood up and crossed her arms again, trying to act unaffected. Well, congratulations, she said with a small smirk. You can play by ear. But next time, maybe ask before touching things that aren't yours. Nia lowered her head, murmured an apology, and hurried toward the kitchen, where her mother waited. Later, when everyone had gone, Lena found her sitting on the back steps staring at the rain. You shouldn't let them make you feel small, she said gently. You played beautifully. Nia looked up, her eyes glistening a little. They laughed, Mama. Her mother sat beside her and wrapped an arm around her shoulders. They laughed because they don't understand. People often mock what they can't do themselves. But I didn't mean to show off, Nia whispered. I just wanted to hear the song properly. It sounded wrong. Lena smiled faintly. And you made it sound right. That's something to be proud of. Nia leaned her head against her mother's shoulder. Do you think I'll ever be able to really learn, like in a school? Her mother hesitated. The truth was heavy in her heart. Maybe someday, she said softly. If life gives us that chance. That night, after everyone was asleep, Lena walked quietly into the living room. She looked at the piano, her reflection faint in the darkness. She thought of all the hours her daughter had spent dreaming beside it. She knew what she had to do. She took a deep breath and whispered into the quiet room. If she was born with this gift, I can't let it go to waste. From that night onward, things changed. Whenever they stayed late, Lena let Nia play freely after finishing the chores. She would stand nearby, keeping watch in case someone entered while Nia practiced. Sometimes the girl would make up her own songs, soft, gentle melodies that spoke of things words couldn't describe. Lena started saving small amounts of money, coins here and there from her pay. She hid them in a small box beneath her bed. It wasn't much, but she told herself that one day, it might buy her daughter a chance, a lesson, a book, maybe even a piano keychain to remind her of her dream. One afternoon, when Lena was dusting the shelves in the study, she overheard Mrs. Harrison talking to her husband. We're hosting a dinner next weekend, she said. You know how much these business partners love entertainment. Perhaps the children can play something. That's a fine idea, Mr. Harrison replied. Music always sets a good tone for guests. Lena's heart jumped. A dinner party meant people, noise, and music, and maybe, just maybe, an opportunity. That evening, she told Nia what she had heard. Nia's eyes widened. Do you think they'll let me play? Her mother smiled sadly. I don't know, my love, but maybe fate will find a way. For the next few days, Nia practiced even harder in secret. She would wait until the house was quiet, then sit at the piano and play every piece she remembered, mixing them into her own versions. The notes filled the empty rooms with warmth as though the walls themselves were listening. And though she didn't know it, Someone else had been listening too. One of Mr. Harrison's guests had arrived early one evening and stood quietly by the doorway as Nia played. He was an older man, kind-faced, and a well-known piano teacher in the city. When Nia finished and noticed him, she gasped and jumped up, her face turning red. The man smiled gently. "That was beautiful," he said softly. "Who taught you?" Nia looked down. "No one. I just listen." He nodded, clearly impressed. "You have a gift, young lady." Before she could say more, Lena appeared, startled to see him there. She apologized, explaining that Nia was just helping with cleaning. But the man smiled again. "You should be proud. Not many people can play like that, especially without lessons." After he left, Nia stood silent, her heart racing. For the first time, someone outside her little world had seen what she could do. That night, as she lay in bed, she whispered softly to herself, "Maybe I really am meant to play." And though she didn't yet know how, something in her heart told her that her music was no longer just a secret. It was a beginning. ChatGPT said, "The days after that strange encounter were quiet yet heavy for both the maid and her daughter." The young girl couldn't stop thinking about that piano. Every sound from it still played in her mind like an unfinished song. She wished she could touch those keys again just once, not to show off, but to feel that peace she had felt when her fingers first touched them. It wasn't about fame, money, or even approval. It was something deeper, something she couldn't explain. It was like that piano had spoken to her heart. Her mother noticed how quiet she had become. The girl helped her clean the big rooms, polish the floors, and dust the tall shelves, but her thoughts were always somewhere else. Sometimes she would pause, wipe her hands on her apron, and look toward the music room door as if waiting for something. One afternoon, while cleaning, the maid saw her daughter lingering again. "You like that piano, don't you?" she asked softly. The girl looked down, embarrassed. I want to play it again. I want to play something for you," she whispered. The mother smiled faintly, though sadness rested in her eyes. "That's not for us, my dear. That's for them. We're just here to work." The girl nodded, but deep down something told her she was meant for more than cleaning floors in silence. A few days later, an unexpected opportunity arrived. The family was planning a small dinner gathering, and the lady of the house wanted the music room spotless for the guests. The maid was asked to clean it thoroughly that morning, and since she trusted her daughter's help, she brought her along. The grand piano stood in the corner, polished and shining, reflecting the morning light through the window. It looked even more beautiful than before. The maid left for a moment to fetch clean towels, and the girl stood alone in that quiet, sunlit room. The air was still, except for the faint ticking of a wall clock. She looked around nervously, then slowly reached out her hand. Her fingertips touched the cool, smooth keys. She pressed one lightly, just one. A soft note filled the air. It was so pure and clear that it made her heart race. She pressed another and another. Soon her hands began to move in rhythm, playing the tune she had been humming in her head all week. Her movements were graceful and natural, as if the piano understood her every emotion. The music rose and fell, filling the entire room with warmth. What she didn't realize was that someone was standing outside the door. One of the older maids had paused in the hallway, frozen by the sound. She couldn't believe it. Such beautiful playing coming from the maid's daughter. She peered through the half-open door and watched in awe as the young girl played, eyes closed, lost in her own world. When the maid returned, she saw her daughter sitting at the piano, fingers gliding across the keys, unaware of the audience she had drawn. Her heart jumped in fear. "Stop!" she whispered sharply. The girl froze, her fingers lifting from the piano as if it had burned her. Before either could say more, the door swung open. The lady of the house stood there with a cold expression. Behind her, a few guests had also gathered, curious about the unexpected music. The room fell silent except for the heavy sound of breathing. The maid quickly bowed her head. "I'm so sorry, ma'am. She didn't mean any harm. I'll make sure this never—" But the lady raised her hand to stop her. She walked closer, looking at the piano, then at the girl. "You were playing?" she asked, her voice calm but sharp. The girl nodded slowly, her eyes wide with fear. For a long moment, the lady said nothing. Then she gave a small, almost mocking smile. "Interesting. You think just anyone can touch this piano and make music?" The guests murmured among themselves. One of them, a man in a dark suit, said lightly, "Well, it did sound lovely for a moment. Maybe we should let her play a bit more?" He said it as a joke, but the lady took it differently. She turned to the girl and said, "All right then. If you think you can play something now. Let's see what you can do." The girl looked helplessly at her mother, who shook her head slightly, silently begging her not to. But something inside the girl told her she couldn't back down now. Her hands trembled, but she sat down again at the piano. The guests leaned in with interest. Some of them clearly thought it was all a joke. The lady crossed her arms, waiting to be entertained. The maid stood near the wall, her hands clenched tightly, praying her daughter wouldn't be humiliated. The girl took a deep breath. Then slowly she began to play. At first the notes were soft and uncertain, but as she continued, her confidence grew. The melody she chose wasn't anything famous. It was something she had created herself, inspired by her mother's voice humming lullabies at night. It was warm, tender, and full of emotion. Each note told a story, and soon the room grew completely still. The laughter faded. The mockery vanished. Everyone's eyes were fixed on her. Even the lady's face softened, surprise flickering across her features. The music rose higher, her fingers moving faster, yet each sound felt like it came straight from her heart. When she finished, the last note hung in the air like a soft whisper. Silence followed. The girl looked up, unsure of what would happen next. Then slowly one of the guests clapped. Another joined, then another, until the room was filled with applause. The maid covered her mouth, tears in her eyes. She couldn't believe what she was seeing. Her daughter being applauded by the same people who had always looked down on them. The lady of the house didn't clap. She simply stared, her expression unreadable. Finally she said quietly, "Who taught you to play like that?" The girl looked down. "No one, ma'am. I just learned by watching videos sometimes. I practiced in my mind when I couldn't touch a piano." The lady's eyes narrowed slightly, as if trying to understand how that was possible. Then she turned away without another word and left the room. The guests, still murmuring with amazement, followed her out. As soon as the door closed, the maid rushed to her daughter and hugged her tightly. "Oh, my dear," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "You shouldn't have done that. But you were wonderful." The girl smiled weakly. "I just wanted to play it for you, Mama. I wanted you to hear it once." They didn't know that this small moment would change everything. That performance, meant only as a simple act of love, would echo far beyond the walls of that grand house. The guests couldn't stop talking about the maid's daughter who played like a young prodigy. Some of them told the story to others, and within days, whispers spread through the neighborhood. One guest, a music teacher who had attended the dinner, couldn't stop thinking about it. He was certain the girl's talent was real, not just luck. He quietly began asking about her, wanting to know where she came from and whether she had ever been trained. Meanwhile, inside the mansion, things grew tense. The lady of the house seemed troubled. Perhaps she felt embarrassed that a maid's daughter had amazed her guests. Or perhaps somewhere deep down she felt something she hadn't expected: respect. The maid, however, feared she might lose her job. But instead of anger, the next morning the lady called her to the study. Her voice was calm, controlled, as she said, "Your daughter has something special. Keep her away from the piano for now. I need time to think." The maid didn't know what that meant, but she nodded silently. She wanted to protect her daughter more than anything. That night, as they walked home under the dim streetlights, the girl held her mother's hand tightly. "Did I do something wrong?" she asked softly. Her mother smiled through her tears. "No, my dear. You did something beautiful, and someday the world will understand it too." She didn't know then how right she was. That moment in the music room had lit a spark that would soon grow brighter than either of them could imagine. The girl's life, and her mother's, was about to change. The story about the maid's daughter spread quietly but steadily. It moved through whispers in the neighborhood, passed between dinner conversations and casual talks. People couldn't stop talking about that little girl who played the piano like she was born to do it, even though she had never taken a single lesson. It sounded unbelievable, yet those who had been there at the dinner couldn't deny what they had witnessed. The maid tried to ignore the growing talk. She wanted to keep her daughter safe and focused. Life had always taught her that attention could bring trouble, especially when it came from people who thought they were above you. But her daughter's eyes still shined with something new: hope. She spent her free moments drawing piano keys on the kitchen table with chalk, or tapping out rhythms on the edge of their bed, lost in her own world of sound and melody. A week later, something unexpected happened. The lady of the house called the maid into her office again. Her voice was calm but carried a certain weight. "I've spoken to a few people," she said, looking over some papers on her desk. One of my guests from that night, a music teacher, has asked to meet your daughter. He said he was impressed by what he heard. The maid froze. Ma'am, please. I don't want any trouble. She didn't mean to play that day. I'm not angry, the lady interrupted. If anything, I'm curious. There's no harm in letting him see her play, is there? Maybe he can tell us if it's real talent or just luck. The maid didn't know what to say. She looked down at her hands, then finally nodded. If it's all right with you, ma'am. Bring her tomorrow, the lady said simply. Let's see what happens. That night, when the maid told her daughter, the girl's heart raced with excitement. A real music teacher? She asked. He wants to see me play? Her mother nodded slowly. Yes, but remember, this is not a game. Be respectful and don't get your hopes too high. Some people only want to watch, not to help. The girl understood. But still, she couldn't sleep that night. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling, imagining the keys beneath her fingers, hearing the notes in her mind. The next afternoon, the lady waited in the music room with the teacher, a man in his early 50s with gentle eyes and a calm voice. He greeted the maid and her daughter warmly. So you're the young pianist everyone's talking about, he said kindly. Let's see what you can do. The girl sat down at the piano. For a moment, she closed her eyes and took a deep breath. Then she began to play. The sound that came out was delicate yet powerful. Her fingers moved effortlessly, like they were guided by something greater than her. The melody flowed through the room like sunlight, touching every corner with warmth. The teacher listened intently, his expression softening with every passing note. When she finished, there was silence. He stood there for a few seconds before speaking. How long have you been playing? She looked up shyly. I haven't really played before, sir. I just remember sounds in my head and try to make them. He nodded slowly, clearly amazed. You have something very rare, he said quietly. It's not just talent. You have instinct. You understand music in a way that can't be taught. The lady raised her eyebrows, slightly surprised. So it's not a coincidence? Not at all, the teacher replied. This girl could be extraordinary if she's guided properly. The maid's heart swelled with both pride and fear. She didn't want her daughter to get lost in a world that wasn't kind to people like them, but she could also see the spark in her child's eyes, that pure love for music that couldn't be ignored. The teacher smiled at the girl. Would you like to learn? I could teach you. You wouldn't have to pay anything right now. I just want to see how far you can go. Tears welled in the maid's eyes. Sir, that's too kind. He shook his head. Kindness has nothing to do with it. Talent deserves a chance. The lady watched silently, her expression unreadable. Finally, she spoke. If you think she's worth teaching, then do it. But she can only come after work hours. I don't want any distraction during the day. Of course, the teacher agreed, and just like that, a new chapter began. Every evening after work, the maid and her daughter walked to the teacher's small studio on the other side of town. It wasn't fancy, just a quiet room with an upright piano and a few shelves full of sheet music. The girl would sit eager and alert as the teacher showed her scales, notes, and rhythm. But what amazed him most was how quickly she learned. She could listen to a piece once and play it back almost perfectly. Weeks passed and the girl's skill grew. Her touch became smoother, her control more refined. Sometimes when the teacher closed his eyes, he could hardly believe that the sounds filling the room were coming from a child who had never been trained before. Her mother always sat quietly in the corner, watching her daughter bloom. She didn't understand music, but she understood emotion. And every time her daughter played, she could feel it deep in her soul. One evening, after a lesson, the teacher said to the maid, I think she's ready for something more. There's a local music showcase coming up. It's small, but it's a start. I want her to play there. The maid hesitated. A showcase? With people watching? Yes, he said. It'll be good for her. People need to hear her gift. The girl's eyes sparkled. Please, Mama, let me try. The maid looked at her daughter's hopeful face and finally nodded. All right, but promise me you'll stay humble no matter what happens. The day of the showcase came quickly. The small auditorium was filled with families, students, and local musicians. The girl stood backstage, nervous but excited. She could hear the faint sounds of other performers before her. Violins, flutes, and singers. Her heart pounded, not from fear, but from anticipation. When her name was called, she walked onto the stage. The lights felt warm on her face. The audience looked curious. They didn't know who she was. Just that she was a young girl from a modest background. She sat at the piano, closed her eyes and began to play. The first few notes were soft and steady, but soon the melody grew into something breathtaking. It was a song she had written herself, a piece filled with the sounds of her life, her mother's gentle voice, the rhythm of footsteps on the mansion floor, the distant hum of the city at night. The audience sat frozen, completely silent. When she finished, there was a moment of stillness before the applause began. It wasn't polite or forced. It was real, full of awe and admiration. Backstage, the maid hugged her daughter tightly. "You did it, my dear. You really did it," the teacher smiled, his eyes shining. "She's going to go far," he said quietly. "I can see it." Word spread again, this time faster. A local journalist who attended the showcase wrote an article about her, the maid's daughter who plays like a dream. The story touched many hearts, and soon more people wanted to hear her play, but with recognition came challenges. Some people didn't believe her story. Others whispered cruel things, saying she didn't belong among real musicians. The maid tried to protect her daughter from the noise, reminding her to stay focused on the music. One evening, after reading another article about her performance, the lady of the house called the maid again. She looked thoughtful. "Your daughter has made quite a name for herself," she said. "You should be proud." The maid bowed her head. "I am, ma'am. Thank you for allowing her to start." The lady paused, then added, "Perhaps it's time the world hears her on a bigger stage." The maid looked up, surprised. "What do you mean?" "There's a charity event next month," the lady said. "Many important people will be there. If your daughter plays, it could open doors for her. I'll make sure she gets a chance." The maid was speechless. For the first time, the lady's tone didn't sound distant. It sounded almost kind. When she told her daughter the news, the girl's eyes filled with tears of joy. "Mama," she whispered, "I can't believe this is happening." Her mother smiled softly, touching her cheek. "You've worked for it, my dear. Now it's your turn to show them who you really are." And as the evening light faded outside their small home, the girl sat quietly at the piano, her fingers tracing the keys. She wasn't nervous anymore. She knew this was her calling. And no matter where life took her, she would always play for the same reason she started. For her mother, and for the love of music that had grown deep within her heart. Little did they know, the performance she was about to give at that charity event would not only change their lives forever, but also touch the hearts of everyone who heard her play. The day of the charity event arrived with a quiet buzz of excitement. The city was full of movement that evening. Cars pulled up to the grand hall. People in elegant clothes stepped out, and flashes from cameras lit up the steps. Inside, chandeliers sparkled and music played softly in the background. Everyone who mattered seemed to be there. Business owners, journalists, musicians, and families filled the hall, chatting politely as they took their seats. The maid and her daughter arrived early. The girl wore a simple white dress the music teacher had gifted her. It wasn't fancy, but it fit her perfectly. Her mother had ironed it with such care that it looked new. As they stood near the stage, the girl's heart thumped fast. It was the biggest crowd she had ever seen. She could hear the distant hum of voices, the sound of clinking glasses and the shuffle of shoes on polished floors. Everything felt so big, too big for her small hands and simple dreams. Her mother placed a hand on her shoulder and whispered, "Don't look at them, my dear. Just close your eyes and play. Pretend you're home and it's just you and the piano." The girl nodded. Her hands were trembling, but she smiled weakly. "I'll play it for you, Mama, just like always." Backstage, the music teacher gave her a gentle pat on the back. "Remember, don't try to impress anyone. Just speak with your music. That's what you do best." Soon the lights dimmed slightly and the announcer walked onto the stage. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said with a bright voice, "tonight's final performance is a special one. Please welcome a young girl who has captured hearts with her extraordinary gift. She may come from a humble background, but her music speaks louder than anything else." The audience clapped politely. The girl took a deep breath and walked out under the warm lights. The hall was silent now, filled with hundreds of eyes watching her every step. She reached the grand piano, bowed her head slightly, and sat down. Her small frame looked even smaller under the large chandelier above, but her presence was strong. She closed her eyes for a moment, remembering her mother's words. Then her fingers touched the keys and the first note echoed through the hall. The sound was soft, almost fragile, but it carried a kind of emotion that silenced the entire room. Slowly, the melody grew richer, deeper. The notes told a story of love, struggle, and hope. The audience didn't just hear the music. They felt it. It reminded them of their own hidden dreams, their own lost moments. Each movement of her hands seemed to breathe life into the piano. She played as if her heart was pouring out through her fingertips. The melody rose like a gentle wave, then fell softly, only to rise again, stronger than before. As she played, her mind drifted. She saw her mother cleaning rooms, smiling despite the tiredness. She remembered all the nights when her mother hummed lullabies while cooking, and how those songs had filled their little home with warmth. She remembered the first time she touched this piano, the laughter she'd heard and how that laughter had turned into applause. Now, all those memories became sound, pure unspoken words carried through music. When she struck the final note, the sound lingered in the air before fading into silence. For a few seconds, no one moved. Then the hall erupted in applause, loud, sincere, overwhelming. People stood up, clapping with tears in their eyes. Some even shouted, "Bravo," while others wiped their faces quietly. The girl stood up slowly, bowing shyly. Her mother, standing near the side of the stage, couldn't stop crying. The music teacher clapped proudly, his eyes glistening. The lady of the house, who had been sitting near the front, didn't clap right away. She just stared at the young girl, something soft flickering in her eyes. Pride, maybe, or realization. Then she began to clap too, slowly at first, then louder, until her hands joined the rhythm of the others. After the performance, several people came forward to speak to the girl and her mother. A well-dressed woman introduced herself as a representative from a music academy. "Your daughter has an extraordinary gift," she said. "We would love to offer her a full scholarship to study here." The maid covered her mouth in disbelief. "A scholarship, you mean? She can learn for real?" "Yes," the woman smiled. "All expenses covered." "We've never seen raw talent like this." The girl's eyes widened. She turned to her mother, unsure if she was dreaming. The maid's eyes filled with tears again as she whispered, "This is what you deserve, my dear." The music teacher, standing nearby, smiled warmly. "I told you the world would notice." As the night went on, more people came to congratulate them. Some offered to sponsor her performances, others wanted interviews. But through it all, the girl stayed humble, thanking everyone politely, always glancing back at her mother for reassurance. Later that night, after the crowd left and the hall emptied, the girl went back to the stage one last time. The piano sat quietly under the soft light. She ran her hand over the keys and whispered, "Thank you." Her mother joined her, standing silently beside her. They both looked around the empty hall, still echoing with the sound of applause. "You did it," her mother said softly. "All those years I worried, all those nights I prayed. You did it." The girl smiled, resting her head against her mother's shoulder. "It's not just me, Mama. You're the reason I play. Every song I play, it's for you." Her mother wiped her tears and kissed her forehead. "Then keep playing. The world needs to hear it." Months passed after that night, and their lives changed more than they ever imagined. The girl began studying at the academy, learning from some of the best teachers in the country. She practiced for hours each day, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. Music wasn't work for her, it was joy. Her mother still worked part-time at the mansion, but things were different now. The lady of the house treated her with quiet respect. Sometimes she even asked about her daughter's progress. The maid noticed a small change in her tone. Less pride, more curiosity, maybe even admiration. One afternoon, the lady invited the girl and her mother back to the mansion. "We're hosting a special event for the academy," she explained. "It would be an honor if your daughter would perform here again." The maid hesitated, remembering how it had all begun in that very house, with laughter and doubt. But her daughter smiled. "Of course," she said. "That piano is where my journey started." On the day of the event, the mansion was filled with guests again. But this time, the girl wasn't a servant's child sneaking a moment at the keys. She was the guest of honor. When she walked into the music room, even the lady of the house stood to greet her. She sat down at the same grand piano she had once touched in secret. Her fingers rested gently on the keys as she looked across the room. Her mother stood at the back, her eyes shining with pride. The lady of the house watched quietly, and the music teacher smiled from his seat near the front. Then, once again, she began to play. The sound filled the mansion like sunlight breaking through clouds. It was the same warmth as before, but stronger, freer, brighter. The melody carried gratitude, forgiveness, and hope. It told the story of a little girl who dared to dream, and a mother who never stopped believing in her. When the last note faded, the room erupted with applause again. But this time the girl didn't bow right away. She stood, walked over to her mother, and took her hand. Together they bowed before the audience. Later that night, as they walked home under the stars, the girl said softly, "Mama, do you think Grandma would have liked my music?" Her mother smiled through happy tears. "She would have loved it, my dear. And she'd be proud, just like I am." The girl looked up at the sky, feeling the cool breeze on her face. "Then I'll keep playing," she whispered. "Not for fame, not for applause, just for love." And that's exactly what she did. Years later, people would still talk about the maid's daughter who played like no one else. She would go on to perform on big stages, travel to faraway places, and share her gift with the world. But no matter how far she went, she always carried one thing in her heart: the image of her mother standing quietly in the corner, smiling with pride. Because in the end, it wasn't about proving anyone wrong. It was about proving that music, love, and hope can come from anywhere. Even from the hands of a young girl who once asked, "Can I play it for my mom?"